And Ed, you are now presenting.
Okay, so show my screen. And you should be able to see me
It's moving
around.
now. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Great. So, if you want to catch part 1, it's right here, February. Here's the documentation, and there's a recording. The last 6 months or so, we've been making recordings. We had over 2,000 hits for the year-end recording, where we did the year-end closing. We don't have that many clients and users, so I'm grateful for all of you that came back over and over again and got something out of that. And your feedback is always welcome. You can look into 2009, it moves here, and see a whole year's worth of lunch and learns, some of which have recordings. So if you wanted the year-end one, here it is with lots of documentation. There's a zip file with 50 different documents in it. So you can download that and have everything you need. That's just a Premier website. All right. Let's get out of that. Let's get into our material for today. So this is our syllabus. We're going to look at document types as a foundation for where we're going with other things. And then we're going to go to some vendor cards, and then we're going to go to checks. And one of the main things we're going to talk about is use taxes today. So you have 2 handouts. The second one is use taxes. The first one is the one that's on screen right now. And those of you who are off-site, Shane should have emailed these to you, this one last week, maybe again today, as well as the use tax one that we'll be getting into. So, in Great Plains, we have Payables transaction entry. So I've added a shortcut up here to the purchasing series, and the very first button on the toolbar is Payables transaction entry. And we have 5 out of the 6 types. We have several debit types and several credit types. The one that's missing there is a payment type, because it's on a different window. If you go to manual checks, or you're processing checks, you're essentially making payments, and they are default that way. But here, if it's an invoice, then it's a purchase down here. Once I click off that, you can't see the change, so I'll clear it. If it's a finance charge, then this will be a finance charge. If I delete that, and if I go to the next one, miscellaneous charge, it'll be called a purchase, but it'll be tracked as a miscellaneous charge. When I put in an amount and go to distributions, sorry, got to put in a vendor. We drop in our Ace Travel vendor. Then that purchase will show up as a purchase here, but on this other screen, it is being tracked as a miscellaneous charge. So they tend to go to purchases. Let me clarify a little more here and see the difference. If I were to go to a finance charge for Ace Travel, and I were to put in an amount, the distribution window would put that to a type of finance charge. So some of these types over on the primary window will drive a type on the secondary window. So some of them are purchases, some of them are finance charge. What about trade discounts? Well, trade discounts comes in on this line here. Let's clear this and look at a credit memo. So a credit memo, when we put in an amount for that, it's now a credit memo. And the nice thing about credit memos is that they are credits, first of all. So it's not going in as a debit. And it is going as a purchase type. So it's not a credit memo type, but it's a purchase type with a credit amount. So sometimes they flip back and forth. Okay? It depends on what type it is. Let's say okay on that one, delete this one, and look at the last one, a return. Now on the credit memo, we have credit memos here and 1099s, but nothing available on the right side below that. On returns, the right side becomes available as well. So you can actually record information on the right side. And it will be a return for the description, and the distribution will be, got to put one in, sorry. Refresh my distribution window, and it will be a purchase credit, okay? So watch for those, and don't be changing these around. in your distribution window. If you do, you'll get errors usually saying that that doesn't match the header window that we went in the first place, unless you really know what you're doing. This is useful sometimes when you're trying to do integrations, then you need to know how this is working in the background. Remember, this is an advanced class, so if this is a little over your head, write it off and just follow along with the rest. But I wanted you to see those relationships so you know that what's on one window drives the other. What about these other types? Miscellaneous goes with whatever you put on the miscellaneous line. Taxes with what goes on the tax line. So if there were amounts in there, you would see those. If there was freight, if there was miscellaneous, if there was taxes, then I'd have to put in a tax note. And now when I go to distributions and refresh it, I get more. I get the purchase of a credit of 10. I now have a credit for the freight. I have a credit for miscellaneous. And I have an accounts payable. Now I have an accounts payable because there's no payment on the right side. If I say OK, and I record a check for this net of $11.90, and I give it a check number, notice it goes to a check book. Now when I go back to distributions and refresh the screen, payables is gone, and it's a cash transaction. So all of these things work together. Now there's a payment essentially going in there. And that payment is over here. There's a payment number. Just like there's a voucher number up here for the invoice, there's a payment number for the payment, and they're applied to each other. So we now have a completely applied invoice going to a payment. But this one is a credit memo. And essentially we're recording as if they had paid us, and we're giving them credit for that. So there's a lot going on these windows. We're going to need that information as we look at some of these use tax issues. But you've now seen that we have invoices, finance charges, miscellaneous, returns, credit memos, payments. All of these are available up here. Indeed, you have miscellaneous purchase, but you still have a miscellaneous. And where do the GL accounts from these come from? If we pull up a vendor and we drill back on the vendor, they have accounts. So depending on what type it was, will drive the account. Many of these will be blank. Some of these are set up at the company level. If your vendor doesn't have them, they come from the company. But a miscellaneous, the line here called miscellaneous will go to whatever the miscellaneous GL account is. A miscellaneous type up here will only drive the purchase, which will still go to the purchase account. Okay? So generally what we're dealing with is invoices going to a purchase account, and maybe there's a miscellaneous which we use for labor as opposed to items or costs of materials. So you can define miscellaneous however you want. Trade discounts will be credits, freight will be a debit, unless this is a return or a credit memo, in which case everything is reversed. Taxes are driven by tax schedules. If you don't have your tax schedules on, you can just plug it in. Most of us tend to put the full amount right up here and don't calculate taxes as we go. But we'll see how that works a bit with use taxes in a few minutes. Before I leave that subject, though, if I go back to a brand new invoice,